I was a professional cyclist, which led to somewhat of an identity crisis. But yeah, decided to start a sock company, took $1,000 from my student loans and bootstrapped it. My co-founder quit and I had to buy him out. So I took a $150,000 loan, wanted to try and see if I could do it again. Like took a seemingly impossible goal and made it happen. 5 years, and we were approaching 10 million in sales at that point. It was a business that was going, and it was pretty scary to have to change your name, because I think then that becomes building the business for my ego again.
Hello, sir.
Morning.
Good morning. We're just getting folks in the waiting room. We had 32 registration. All right, we're gonna let people in. Hey guys, thanks for joining. Hey guys, nice to see everyone. Good to see some familiar faces. So just to respect everyone's time, since we're already 2 minutes in, we're just gonna get started. We've got a nice little bit of a quick Q&A here session with Rob. And the intent of this really just to kick us off is, for this fireside chat and these chats that we'll be having going forward. This will be like a private founder to founder or founder to leader conversation. So we might have some leaders in the group that are, ex-presidents of some larger corporations that are now becoming entrepreneurs, going to scale something big as well. So at the end of the day, we're really going to try to build something that's a little bit more just accessible to folks, doesn't have a price, it's all going to be free. So we're just trying to highlight really strong folks and entrepreneurs in our community, particularly in Canada right now, just to start. And I thought Rob would be the perfect person to kick this off. So Rob, here's my little speech for you. Rob Fraser is the founder and CEO of Outway, performance sock and athletic brand, an accessory brand, and mission on to inspire personal bests. So what started as a small direct-to-consumer brand has since grown to Canadian success story. But behind the brand is a story about perseverance, rebuilding, redefining success, lessons that I think every founder in this room can probably relate to. So Rob, welcome to the Fireside. So before we kind of dig into it, why don't we start with a little bit about talking about yourself? Who were you before Outway? What was life like as an athlete, part of your identity? How did you grow up and what was it like?
Yeah, hey, happy to be here. Thanks, Dennis and everyone. What I call my former life, I was a professional cyclist. So childhood dream that came true, somewhat surprisingly, from 14, 15 years old and to my early mid-20s, I traveled around the world racing my bike. I did downhill mountain bike racing. And honestly, I thought that would be my life. You kind of accomplish your childhood dream, you're doing it. You think that, especially when you're in your teens and early 20s, you think your entire life is right then and there and there's not much ahead of you. So it became pretty jarring and a reality check when I realized that, I'm going to have to retire from the sport at some point, and I wasn't making as much money as I thought I would need to make to just retire for the next, 60 years or however long I might live after early 20s. So I had to come with that realization that, I needed to kind of start thinking about what would be next, which led to somewhat of an identity crisis, because having this sort of single goal I was working towards for so long and this identity attached myself to that seemingly went away overnight, because along with the career, but also just the friends you would see and kind of everything that comes with it, the community, the purpose was gone. So I spent about 2 years sort of searching for what could be next, thinking maybe going back to school, think maybe a career in sport would make sense. But really missed that kind of waking up every day with a really big goal and that fire inside that, you want to go chase something big, and came across business and entrepreneurship just by kind of happenstance. I read the 4-Hour Workweek, which probably most people have read or come across at some point, and it just kind of flicked a switch in my brain where I was I think business could be my new sport, and really what I was trying to do is just
nice.
I wanted to create a brand in the athletic space that allowed me to get back to what I was doing. So maybe I could be an athlete anymore, but I could go to the events to interact with the athletes. I kind of re-immerse myself in that ecosystem just on the brand side. That was a real motivation to kind of just keep the dream alive, not get a real job was the only thing. I had no business experience though. Everything I'll kind of share today is just the past 10 years of learning by doing.
Amazing.
But yeah, decided to start a sock company, took $1,000 from my student loans and bootstrapped it.
Well, thank you for kicking us off with that. I think you've already probably even touched on a couple elements that resonate with some of the folks in the group here, because I know some folks are already professional athletes. They were professional athletes and got into business themselves. So you might have touched on this, but just we'll wrap it up with a question here. So what was the spark that led you from professional cycling in particular to founding a sock company? Was there something there?
It was really just that desire to have a somewhat of a singular focus and really big, seemingly impossible goal. I think that's in reflection what really drives me. I think most entrepreneurs feel
Ah,
compelled to do something, like it calls you and you just want to work on a big goal that seems somewhat ridiculous. And I had proven to myself once before that I could do it with the cycling career. I raced, like I said, downhill mountain bikes and grew up in Pickering, Ontario, where there's no mountains. So, like took a seemingly impossible goal and made it happen. And I just wanted to try and see if I could do it again. Prove to myself maybe that it wasn't a fluke. And um, that was the main thing. It wasn't necessarily what I just loved the act of kind of pursuing a big goal.
I hear you. So it didn't have like there wasn't a fully articulated why, but it was like that drive for it. So now that you've matured through like this process and you've seen the scaling of the business, a lot of the founders on this call would say like typically there's a why, the Simon Sinek, the three circles, right? Like, is there a why that you've defined that as well that you could well articulate today that maybe like is inspired by those roots?
I think business is just like a personal pursuit wrapped up in, uh some sort of brand or whatever. For me, I don't know. I don't know what my why would be necessarily. I think honestly my why is that, like I said, I just want to I think for sport or business for me as a way to express my creativity or express sort of what I want to see come to life in the world. I say like that's what brings me passion. And honestly, the why I guess would be staying involved in sport. I loved it so much that I wanted to stay involved, but I also wanted to stay involved in a way that I was in control, if that makes sense. So I wasn't working for an
Yeah.
organization, like I could still carve a path and make an impact. And I got a job in that kind of lost identity period and go back to school in the sport at Canadian Sport Institute where I was working with future Olympians. And I just felt that those organizations, like there wasn't enough opportunity to really affect change. And so I figured if I wanted to do something impactful, I need to do it by myself or create a company.
It's very curious. So you had a passion, you built a business around it to keep inside the passion. I guess now that the company is scaled beyond yourself and you're employing many people, giving back to the community and getting engaged with sports in a different way. Like when did that realization kick in for you that Outway could become something much bigger than yourself? And was there like a point in time when it was like, oh shit, okay, I got responsibilities now?
Yeah,
Do
for
you
sure.
remember what it was like?
Yeah, so I mean, like there's a few like moments in time that I had to make that decision to keep going. One would be dropping out of school, which was like, like to a pretty big decision because like it was this constant struggle in my family. We were a very traditional family of like go to school, go to university, get the safe job. And I had avoided that for a while by doing the sport thing. And then when I finally went to school, my parents were like, oh, finally he's got his life back on track. And then I dropped out again with like this little
I
side
know.
business. They're like, this kid is like just driving us nuts. So that was so yeah, I dropped out of school the second year once it kind of took off. And then I would be quitting the other jobs. So I worked a couple jobs alongside just to kind of de-risk. And so quitting those was like, okay, now I'm all in. And I guess that the biggest thing is I started it with a friend in college. And once realized that it was going to sort of be a thing. And for reference, we did 300K in our first year. So it kind of like started working.
Phenomenal.
It started working like pretty quickly. In our second year, we got on Dragon's Den, and so it started to kind of like, we almost did a million our second year. So like in those first 2 years where I dropped out of school and like quit the jobs, like it was working, and we were profitable early on. We bootstrapped it. But like the real kind of moment where I was like, oh shit, is my co-founder quit and I had to buy him out. So I took a hundred fifty
Oh
thousand
wow.
dollar loan to do that. And so I was like, okay, now I'm in debt, 150K. I've got like a negative net worth. I have to make this work now. So I'd say that was probably the biggest kind of like,
Was that
yeah, oh
early
shit.
journey like completely like left field, or was it once you guys had some scale success?
We maybe had product market fit. So that was in just the end of year two. And so we had like over a million in sales, and it was definitely working, but it was certainly like not to the point where, I think most people would maybe take the risk. It was a pretty big one, but I had a lot of
Right.
conviction in it.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So I guess scaling, up and back to the conversation about this, I'm not sure exactly where this fits in, but the brand, correct me if I'm wrong, it was called Endure before it became Outway, right? Where does that fit in terms of the timeline? Like, was that pre-Dragon's Den, post-Dragon's Den? Like, in terms of, I'm using Dragon's Den as the
Sure.
mile marker.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, co-founder buyout was 2 years in, and then the rebrand from our former name, right, Endure to Outweigh was 5 years. And both of those kind of inflection points were a failure on my part to do the right kind of legal work. So like we had no shareholder agreement with the co-founders. So that's why I had to like
Uh,
buy them out for so much money, and it was such a tumultuous time. And then the rebrand was because this all stems from the idea or the kind of when deciding to start the business, I didn't think it would work, of course, right? A soft business, startup business experience. I'm just like kind of messing around. And I failed to ask myself, what happens if this does work? And if you ask yourself that question, you start thinking about like, okay, decisions I make today, what are the impact of those decisions 5, 10 years from now? And generally speaking, if you're looking like that, you're looking at do I have the right legal protections or some of the unsexy parts of business, but a shareholder agreement would be one, trademarks around your brand name would be a second one. And that's ultimately what happened is we chose a name that championed the brand, and there wasn't a stock brand called Endur. But trademark law doesn't work that way. It's about confusion. And so, 5 years in, once we got some real scale, um, it got on competitors' radar, and one brand in the UK that had a similar name, not the exact same name, basically threatened to us, and they were much larger. The brand itself wasn't much larger, but they were owned by a holdco that owns like Speedo and stuff. So like they had
oh
the
wow.
firepower to kind of just drag this out. And so we had to make a choice at that time to either rebrand and reinvent ourselves or fight a lengthy and expensive legal battle. So kind of both of those things that we've touched on were big learning lessons, and ultimately the result of not making not and it's hindsight's 2020. I didn't know to make better decisions back then, but I mean the takeaway now is certainly like, and we do now make decisions with a pretty long view of where will the other shoe drop is kind of
Right.
like what I always want to
Right.
ask myself. And you can't always do that. Sometimes you just don't have all the answers and you need to move forward. But there are some very simple things like shareholder agreements, trademark uh, diligence that are like kind of like a non-negotiable now moving forward.
I hear you. Yeah. And I guess this is part of the purpose of these fireside chats, right? Is really to provide that firsthand experience. And so, I mean, for everyone listening, shareholder agreements for sure, trademarks. Yeah. I'm sure that sounds like maybe it was the first time you got served kind of a letter. So I know the feeling. It just like you don't know exactly who to talk to. So having other founders to lean on, certainly. At this point, when you got to that scale, was this like at what scale of revenue were you at, if you don't mind me asking? And how long was this into it? You said 5 years?
Yeah, 5 years. We were approaching 10 million in sales at that point. So it was a business that was going, and it was like pretty like scary to have to change your name because we're a brand, right? We're not like a service where it doesn't really, like there's some businesses where the brand name maybe has a little less weight. And thankfully in how we operate our brand in terms of like apparel and brands in general, I'd say like our brand isn't our name isn't as important as say like a Supreme or like a luxury brand would be like a Balenciaga or something because we don't put our name on things, and that's not why people buy what they buy from us. It's because our name's on it. So that made it a little less challenging, but still, it's still you've got all this 5 years of history going one name, and have to now explain why you're another name it was literal hell. And the hardest part of it was not changing, but finding a name that would champion the brand moving forward, while also ensuring to the best of our ability that we would have trademark protection because you don't really know. You can do a ton of diligence, but so they're behind me now. That's why like I proudly displayed them. It
Nice.
took 3 years to get them. They only got it. So we rebranded in 2020. We filed in early 2022, and those came through this year. So like even then, you don't have certainty until they're registered, and even then you can still get challenged. So it's just because like like we did end up raising money. We'll get there, but so I had to kind of share with all the
Hello?
shareholders that like we had to share with all the shareholders that we were going to have to change our name, and they're like, hey, you got to pass on this one, but you can't mess this up again, right? So when you choose the new name, you got to make sure that you don't lose it. And so there's a lot of pressure to get it right.
That's very curious. So, I mean, this was probably the first time I've ever heard of a business that is rebranding at that scale, through like it was not a choice for you, right? Like you actually had to legally deal with it.
Mhm.
I mean, you described it as literal hell, and I could totally appreciate that because it's like not only the actual operational setup, but then the customer perception, all that, right? So is that the one moment that for you that stands out as like the almost quit moment, or is there something else that kind of came up after that, that kind of set you up and saying like, okay, in retrospect, maybe there was something harder that I had to deal with. Um, Hearing it was almost hell makes me think like, oh, okay, that was probably like one of the hardest moments you had to deal with. What are your takes on it?
I'd say it was like the preceding kind of like the 2 years after that got, I wouldn't say I ever got to the point where I wanted to quit because like the hard challenges and like when you're in it, it's almost for me, I would say I'm more of a wartime founder. So like I somewhat thrive under pressure, like maybe the athlete part of me where like,
That's cool.
um, where I get bored when things are going well. And so I've had to actually learn to like redirect my energy when things are going well because I'd have a tendency just to like create chaos to feel energy. And that doesn't work well when you've got a team. And so that's why I've been like running a lot lately. For example, I just go like a hamster basically. But I say like the burnout that I had after the rebrand process is about 6 months of just working all day, and you felt like you're living two lives because like you were still running the Endur brand while building the Outway brand on background, dealing with all the legalities, not only the settlement with the person threatening us, but also all the trademark stuff. And there's so many stories within this too. Like when we found the name Outway, I had to like track down some guy that had a similar mark and like buy it off him. So like
Wow.
there was just all these things that basically I would work all day and then spend all night on the legal side of it. And that 6 months just led to this year and a half of just pretty extreme burnout afterwards. And I wouldn't say that was like a quit moment, but that was like a almost like, oh, I would just give this all back to feel healthy again, if that makes sense. Because
Took a toll on
it
your
was
health.
just so it was just like it's like you got to that point where you almost rock bottom where you're just like, hey, just like I'll give you this if you just give me back feeling like normal again. But I found my way out of that. But that was probably I wouldn't say it was ever from like the work, not hard work. It was just that kind of like the lot like the loss of kind of just livelihood and health was like the main thing that was very difficult because you lose all the fun and passion at that point.
Yeah, yeah. I was just gonna say it sounded like a bit of a soul-sucking time for you. So I guess like taking all this into retrospective now, it's being in Canada in particular, is there something that you wish someone had told you about scaling this kind of business in Canada?
I don't know about scaling. I'd say like maybe just to close up on the kind of legal point was like I wish someone told me that it would end up. And what I would tell people now is like we've now gone through over the last almost 10 years so many of these challenges that felt like death blows, but they we overcame them. And like in hindsight, they weren't actually as scary as they felt at the time. I wish maybe I just someone told me, hey dude, like don't put so much pressure on yourself. It's gonna be okay. And maybe don't rush it because we didn't even have to do it in 6 months. I wanted the pain of the process to stop, so I rushed it. We actually negotiated like a year phase out period. So we could have like really, but I'm the kind of person where like once I've made a decision, I want to just like steamroll ahead. And so more wise me would go back and tell, older me or younger me to be like, hey, dude, like take the time, go to sleep, like relax. It's going to be fine. Um, that's probably the lesson I would impart. It's just that like most things that seem like death blows in business are not.
Yeah, it does seem to be like, when we're in the moment, we feel like this is the one decision we have to make, and we have like 30 seconds to make that decision. It's now or never, right? Not the case.
Mm.
Like just taking a back seat and taking a breather sometimes is the best decision. So I guess moving into, a little bit of the endurance leadership and the founder's mindset, that I think you're well known for in terms of some of the stuff that you talk about. You talked a little bit about endurance as a mindset, right? Like, how do you continue? And you touched a little bit about this on, the hamster wheel, kind of just going out for runs and things like that to keep yourself from creating chaos. But like maybe even beyond this, right? Like, how do you keep that mindset of endurance alive when you're leading your team instead of, racing the bike and not necessarily getting in their way?
Yeah, I think the mindset of endurance is just where we found, and I found a lot of success over the last 2 years. This would be like coming out of those 2 years of like post rebrand and just burnout and struggle was just extending the time horizon. So taking that lesson and being like, hey, we don't need to accomplish all of our goals right now. And are these goals the right goals? Or are they our ego? Or like are they just arbitrary? Like, do they really matter? Do we have to grow at X% this year? And if so, who says? Right? Like, like sometimes we forget as founders that we own the company and like it's supposed to be fun. Like
Yeah.
why else are you doing it? And so like just that mindset of like I stopped doing the things that were fun, honestly. So when I think I was the most burned out and unhappy, I stopped going to the athletic events. I'm more behind the screen. So like, oh, I have to be a CEO now, right? Like I got to be a businessman. It's like, nah, screw that. So like the last couple of years is like I've been like just getting more involved with why I did it, right? Like what would this look like if it was fun? So that meant like stripping away things that were just stress inducing and doing for the sake of like what you think you should be doing. Like looking outward of like what other companies might be doing or other founders might be doing, but failing to look inward and being like, why did I start doing this in the first place, and losing sight of that. And honestly, by doing that, we found a lot more enjoyment and scale. And we've ironically, when kind of removing these growth targets or targets that, and I'll be clear, we have goals and targets, but they're moving. And I say to our team, like, in terms of the endurance mindset, is like, when things aren't going well, like, we're not idiots. And when things are going well, we're not geniuses. Like, it's like we're just doing our best. And our goal is to basically our North Star is like, are we delivering on the customer promise? Like when we say what we're going to do, are we doing that? And are we trying our best to increase the effort or the experience in doing that? Are we selling in more places? Are we making the product better without raising the price? Excellent. So all these things that would create more value for the consumer. And if we're doing those things, it's like we can't fight the macro. We can't fight all these other things. It's like we might as well
Yeah.
just ride those waves. And so the kind of ironic thing is that we've had two of our biggest growth years ever since doing that. And I think it was because we just found, I mean, just took it back to the consumer and also why we do what we do. So I don't know if that's the perfect answer, but I said the endurance
It
mindset is like
is.
we
Yeah.
we wanted we stopped focusing on annual goals and said like, what's it look like to be a brand that is still around in 20 years? That was basically it.
You're really looking at like long-term enduring, you know. I love the fact that it's almost that the scaling of your business has caused you to look more inwards, to become a big therapy session for you to like really refine and define who you are, your purpose, and like looking deeper at that. And as you said, as you admitted, it's like as soon as you surrender to all of this, you know, not trying to control it anymore, it's like you've had your best 2 years yet. And in this economy, mind you, right? So I
Yeah.
think it's very curious just to see like some of the learnings and insights that come from other founders. I would say this is not specific to industry. I think a lot of folks have probably seen the same thing when they get to that scale, just feeling that they need to be in it, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, building on this, that feeling of uncertainty, right? Like, do you have a particular process or ritual for when things go wrong, when you try to just keep yourself out of it, or like how you just keep things together? Is there something that you do, or tips and tricks?
Yeah, it's mainly the mantra that like I think ultimately it's like if we can sit and honestly tell ourselves that we're doing everything in our power to create the right outcome and it's just not happening, then we just have to be patient. And you'll set a timeline on that if things still aren't working and it's been months or like or whatever, you maybe just you have to re-ask yourself like, is this even the right thing to work on then? But it's really come down to that sort of mindset of like, we can only control what we can control. And so if we're doing that, we're not going to be too bothered about the other stuff. And I can say that. I think it just took like, and that's very easy to like, I'm not perfect. Like there's times where I'm just like want to like throw my computer through the wall and say like, why isn't this working? I think we're all human. Um, but it's just taken years to get to that place where I've seen enough cycles where things haven't worked and then work again and then haven't worked and then work again. And you just learn that like this is part of the process. Um, and so like if the founders in this call that are earlier on in the journey, despite telling yourself that, I'm sorry to tell you, probably you're just going to stress out about it. But just know that it shall pass, like generally speaking. But I think the most important thing in where founders because you have to be somewhat delusional to start a business, right? You have this belief that you can do it and that like what you need to create, people want. And so you have this hubris, you've got a bit of delusion, and that really works for you in the early days, and then starts to work against you when you get some level of scale because you start telling yourself like, no, I'm working on the right thing. The market just doesn't know it. And like you really need to go inward at that point and be like, are we actually doing the right thing still? Um, and so that's why I said like being honest with yourself about like, are you really doing the work? Like, are you really doing what the consumer wants, or is it what your ego wants? So just trying to remind yourselves of that. And if you can honestly come to the point where you feel like you're doing the right thing, and this is where like surrounding yourself with people that are comfortable calling you on your bullshit is important too. So like a good team, maybe good mentors or partners that can say, hey, dude, like, sorry, but you're wrong. Um,
Yeah.
I think that's important. But if that all rings true and like you're doing the right things, then you just have to be patient. Things come and go.
It sounds like you've had a really good support circle around you and folks to lean on.
Yeah, for sure.
What does that look like in different phases as you've scaled? Like, have those been the same folks that started with you? Are they like lifers with you? Are you kind of finding different coaches and mentors if you've gone, to different scales? And are you now at a point where like you're spending your time mentoring others? Like, how does that fit in your life?
It's evolved for sure. The first like almost 5 years, it was just me, a small team, and like books and podcasts. I didn't really know any other business people. I didn't go to events. I was just like hyper focused on what we were doing. And I'd say that was that phase where we needed to be just delusional, not diluted with what other people were doing. And honestly, like it was probably that next couple years where like I started to meet mentors, now friends that were way further ahead of me, that almost kind of like made me lose focus because I started being, oh, I need to do this and that and this and that and like look like this. And oh, I need to grow faster because look how far ahead they are. And so that was a bit of a learning process of like almost just trying to like keep up with the Joneses a little bit. But once realizing like, hey, you're already in the club, they're not expecting you to do X, Y, or Z. It's like, you just do
Yeah.
your own thing. That's been incredible. So it looks like now it looks like I've got an incredible group of friends that it just a huge group of friends, honestly. It keeps growing up, just people in business that are either just starting all the way up to like, running billion-dollar companies that I've been fortunate to meet. And then where we live in Victoria, there's just so many great founders too, such a tight community of people running a whole suite of cool businesses. So it looks like connecting with those people individually for lunch. I basically have a lunch meeting every day with different founders or people. That's like the only time I've blocked out, generally speaking, for like external sort of stuff like networking. So I have to eat lunch
Yeah.
anyways, is what I figured. So I try to like connect with other people during those times. I'm still reading a lot, podcasts a lot. And then I've just got a great group of like just friends and people that aren't necessarily in my circle because they need me to perform at work. They'll just call me on my, if I'm not being a good person, right? Because like you don't want a bunch of yes people around or people that you're on your
Right.
payroll because like there's an incentive for them not to be entirely honest with you. Um,
Hmm.
and that's not a bad thing. That's just a reality of human nature. But I'd say like I built my team internally, and so there we do have some lifers. We have some employees that have been with us for 7 years now.
Oh,
Um,
fantastic.
so we have like 4 or 5 that have been there for 5 years plus, which is crazy cool. And like they were there in those early days. Three of them were there when I bought out the co-founder, for example. Like
Oh, wow.
so.
So really OG.
Um, Real OG. And then we've cycled in new people since then. So as the company scaled, we've brought in some more experienced people, but always people that I'm a big believer of just like get the right people and let them do their thing, and I try not to get in their way. I deeply understand what they're doing. I'm not like a set and forget kind of person, but I mean,
It's not a
we're at the
crock pot.
scale.
No.
Yeah, yeah. And so I would like to believe, and I do believe our team is very comfortable telling me how they feel. And I think that the only way to create that comfort is to, when they express those feelings, to meet them with the appreciation that they are and not jump down their throat or whatever. So I think like the only way to actually cultivate that type of culture is how you respond to feedback. And I
Mm.
think I've evolved over the years for sure, as we all have to. And sometimes the feedback's hard to hear, but ultimately I found that when you listen to it, it generally creates a better outcome.
Seems that values are like part of the core of this, the frame that you're looking at is from your personal values, right? And like looking at that feedback of how you treat people, how you respect them. And like you said, it's like as long as we're meeting the customer's needs, we're satisfying them. It's like, hey, what scale can come for another day. Like we're still scaling, don't get me wrong. We're just scaling at the way that we want to do it, right? So with that kind of frame of values, are there in your organization today, like do you look at it as like non-negotiables that you've built into your culture, into Outway's culture? Would you mind sharing that with the crew here?
Yeah, I'd say like one non-negotiable is like we hire for um is like a figure it out mentality. I'd say that's the only one. Like I just have no time or patience for people that need to be handheld. Um, Within reason, obviously. You have someone that new that enters the organization, they need to be trained. So it's not like, hey, figure out where to find the documents in the drive, like don't bother me. It's like, no, but like if someone comes up to a problem, it's like, are you the type of person that's like, oh, I can figure this out? Like that's your default position, right? So we've all met people that go like, oh, I can't do that, right? So like, I mean, we've all met people that go like, oh, I can figure that out, like immediately. I say that's the only non-negotiable generally. Everything else is like every role and person requires a different sort of mentality within reason. So you're gonna need people that are hyper creative. You're gonna need people that are, just systematic and just kind of like workhorse and understanding putting the right people in the right place with the right incentives is important. So having like blanket rules of like we need our entire company to be like X, Y, or Z is probably going to lead to failure because different roles require different personalities and temperaments.
Right.
But I'd say like there are some non-negotiables like that mentality of like every one of those people need to be able to figure it out. And I'd say the only other non-negotiable in general that like our team would be able to echo back is that like we're not afraid to make mistakes. But it's like it's the non-negotiables that you don't make the same mistake twice.
Right,
So
right.
like it's basically just the idea that if we have if we're able to explain why we did something and it didn't work, that's fine. Like if the rationale makes sense or like you took a calculated risk, it didn't work out, like that's most things in life. And that's fine because that's how we're going to progress and learn. But if you make the same mistake twice, then you just failed to learn. And that's just like
Right,
simply failure in my
right.
eyes. And that's kind
It's
of unacceptable.
it's so curious. So it's like curiosity, learning, bettering. So it's like bettering yourself. It's all those kind of things, but wrapped into one. I really like the way that you've encapsulated into a couple sentences. So it's actually quite, maybe something we'll find other founders on this call at some point. You'll be like seeing their websites. You're like, shit, that's mine, right? So
By
credit
all
where it's due,
means.
though.
Yeah.
So now that you're scaling beyond, you've had the two best years yet since founding. When you think of like the next 5 to 10 years ahead, right? Like what kind of legacy do you want Outway to leave? I'm sure, as you're thinking about your kids as well as raising a family, you're kind of getting into a different part of your or a different, stage of your life, right? When you think about legacy, when you think of what's next, what comes to mind?
I think from like there's probably a couple different angles. From like the my kids angle and stuff, like I'm not sure I'm building like a generational brand. Like I'm okay with it not being that at some point. I think the main thing I want to try and show them is that in an apartment. So I'm a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old. So the 5-year-old knows what's going on. And I want those same lessons that hey, you can set a goal and work hard for it and accomplish things and like and look, here is the work that it requires. And I think it's just setting a good example of what that looks like and involve him as well. Like I bring him into kind of conversations of why I'm doing certain things. I have to travel, so we have to have those conversations and show them like, hey, this is just part of the job. But in terms of like generational or like them taking over or whatever, I want them to do whatever they think is exciting. So like I'm not necessarily trying to put them on a path. Um, but other than that, man, like I try to think about it too much because like I think then that becomes like building the business for my ego again. Like if I'm thinking about what I want it to be,
Hmm.
I don't know. Is that really that important? I think what would make me happy is that if it's still around, even if I'm not running it anymore, is that like, hey, it became something
Love
that,
that.
what I'm most proud of is that, it supports many families. We have like many employees, that like this is, some for $1,000 student loan and this crazy idea to come this company that, like people crazy enough come and work for us and they get paid and they start families and they buy homes. And I've seen some of these employees. One of those early ones I talked about, she's had, well, one kid is about to have a second one now. A couple,
Wow.
like literally just last month, two of my employees bought homes. So I'm
Oh.
like writing letters for their mortgage people, right? Like, hey, they worked here and like, so it's like, it's cool. And it's just crazy to me that like, that's something that's been a result of this. So I say like that has been really fulfilling is that like this thing, I think that's the spirit of entrepreneurship and kind of like what I think it should not be lost is that like sometimes business and gets vilified, but in the end of the day, like you need new ideas, you need people creating new things that create job opportunities. And we've paid millions of dollars in tax to
Hmm.
in Canada, right? So that's going into the system to create opportunities for people not even in our business and stuff. So, and then the global impact, like we work globally and with our factories, and so that we're creating jobs all over the place as well, right? Like for example, in our one of our factories in the Philippines, like um, they're creating new lines all the time. That's like 50 new jobs, and these are RAP certified facilities. So these are jobs in areas where the minimum wage is like $1, where they're getting paid a lot better, for example, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's cool too. So I don't know, like legacy wise, I think it'd be cool for me if people still think that it's a good place to work and that the consumer is still getting value of the product like far into the future. That'd be rad.
Well, I'm sure you got like, 20 other customers on this call. So yeah, you got like a nice little network diagram of legacy here. So it will be around for a long time, I'll tell you that. So before we get into the next part of our fireside chat here, just wanted to open the floor to a few Q&A questions because we did have a bit of time scheduled for it, but we're going to introduce a different concept for this chat, which is a little bit more of a open share and dialogue. So I'm just going to introduce the concept before we get into a bit of Q&A. So if anyone has other questions they want to load up, please put them in the chat and then we'll get to them in a minute once I'm done this part. So once we're done the Q&A, essentially what we're going to be doing is this share from Rob. So the idea here is taking it from EO and YPO. Oftentimes within our form groups, we have, a little bit of a share in something that we're looking for either advice or experience shares on. So the idea here is really, as we have a group of a lot of founders and leaders in this team here, for every fireside chat that we're doing with the founder, I wanted to provide the founder the opportunity to bring up something that they're dealing with. It could be personal business. It does not matter. It could be as deep as they want. It could be as shallow as they want, right? So we're not here to judge whatever they're bringing to us, but then to crowdsource some experience shares or ideas, or if they're looking for advice, they'll tell you they're looking for advice. So please don't provide advice if they're not asking for advice. If they're just looking for experience shares, like, hey, I dealt with this. I've got a guy, I got a gal, like, let's go, let's get going, right? So with that being said, I hope everyone kind of understands the concept of that. Before we get into that session, that section of this fireside chat, I see we do have some questions in the chat. So let's get to those first, Rob. We'll kind of go through these quickly, and then hopefully it's given you some time to also consider perhaps what you want to share with the crew here. So let's start with the first question from Jody. How do you engage your employees, and do you do any kind of charitable initiatives that have been aligned to your brand as well?
Yeah, engage the employees. I mean, so we used to all be in the office. We're all remote now, so it's been like an evolving thing. I'd say one thing we're doing next year actually is so our whole brand, like Dennis mentioned, was one of our core values or missions is like powering personal bests, and so we're doing a stipend where we'll invest in someone and their big goal next year. So like we want our employees to come to us and like, hey, I've got this thing I'm working on. It doesn't need to be athletic focused per se. It could be like I even want to like do this dance class or whatever.
It's a
I don't
great
know. Like
idea.
so like we do stuff like that. We do monthly all hands get-togethers, the people that are here in town, and then virtually just to we're a super transparent organization in the sense of like I'll just update everyone like how everything's going very realistically each month. Um, and then just all the kind of generic basic things. But I think like generally our team is made up of kind of people that are uh they're here because they love the work for the most part. And I think like the concept of uh where you need to kind of maybe over-index on kind of like pizza parties and stuff like that. I know that's probably not what you're asking, but you see like these or where it's just like the work's monotonous. We try to make the work very enjoyable. I would say like everyone's here because they actually get a lot of fulfillment out of what they're doing. And the second part, yeah, we do like giving back is kind of we're not a nonprofit, but giving back is core to what we've done. So throughout the years, we've partnered with a tons of athlete foundations. We've donated probably at this point up to close to $1 million in different initiatives. Early on, we helped build a couple bike parks that were part of some athlete initiatives. More recently, we've got involved with some more cancer initiatives. So we do an ongoing sponsorship or not sponsorship donation to BC Cancer. So we sell like a cancer it's an FU cancer sock on our site. Last year, we donated 40 grand, and we do that every year. The coolest thing I'd say we did recently is there's one of our ambassadors. She's a mom, and her son was diagnosed with leukemia last year. And when he was going through chemo, he drew his own sock. He like designed his own sock. And so we made that a real sock and then we sold it and then donated all the proceeds to Island Kids Cancer. We're actually on our second version of it now. So you go on our site, and the original one's called Dreams Gone Wild. And you can see both his designs now. And we've donated, I think, close to, I think, like, it'll be close to 30 or 40 grand for that one as well.
Wow.
So that one I'm pretty stoked on. It's this young kid, and the design's actually rad. Like it was very, very good design. So giving back's built in. At one point, we actually we did a calculation of all the plastic because we use synthetic yarns because we're an athletic brand. So like like any athletic gear is generally now synthetic material. So we did a calculation of what that plastic cost is, and we offset that with reclaiming water bottles from the ocean. It was like 2.5 million water bottles or something like that. So we're always looking to kind of like minimize our impact. It's built into like our values, but it's not necessarily something we talk about because I find sometimes that can be a little cheapening of like just the message if you're trying to like create this sort of, and if a brand's completely positioned around that, that's not how we're positioned. So we just do good because I believe in doing good. We didn't, it's not part of our kind of like business model per se.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. You do good because you are a good person. I think that's just kind of the basic science behind it, right? So there's so
Yeah.
many more questions here. I think we might actually run out of time. So let me just choose one of them. And then, Rob, did you have something you wanted to open the floor to for the team here, or did you want us just to go through the Q&A? It could be either or. We'll leave the option to you, I guess. It's your time.
I honestly, nothing's come to mind. You
Okay.
asked me this before, so if we just want to roll with the
Let's continue
Q&A.
the Q&A then. Yeah, that way
Yeah.
it becomes your choice, right? So, Will's got a great question here saying, looking back, would you invest earlier? What would you invest in earlier that had the biggest long-term payoff? It's a great question.
It's a good question.
Like maybe,
Probably, I mean, people, right? Like ultimately, just investing. I think probably, but it's a luxury, right? So like you kind of get what you can pay for at that time. So I maybe reframe the question. If I had a lump sum of money and got to go back in time, I would
right.
just. I'd also have to know what I know now. So unfortunately, like the problem is when you start a business is like you have limited resources and knowledge, and so you kind of you have to find the people that are really willing to just bet on you, and you have to find the partners that maybe you can afford, and sometimes they're not the most experienced. But like generally speaking, as just a rule for me, like I found when investing in the right people, it's created great outcomes because businesses are just collections of people. That's really all it is, right? And if you find the right people you like working with, and they're smart and they've got the right attitude, that has been the biggest unlock for us is just like bringing on the right people. And the inverse is true. When you have the wrong people, it can be a huge impediment to your business. Um, but I'd say also probably like I'm not, the last answer to that one would be like I would have invested more in my health. I definitely like let it slide during the
Oh,
stressful times in the early days, failing to realize that like you should treat business like a sport, and you should be, almost like taking it just as serious as I was when I was competing, because everything in life gets harder when you're not healthy. Like
mhm.
it's just you're not sleeping well. Like everything gets harder, and so like being okay carving out an hour to go work out or shutting the laptop and going to bed earlier, these are all going to have net positive impacts on the longevity of you and your business. Like you're not going to fall behind.
Yeah, I hope someone on the call probably needed to hear that today because it definitely is being in that founder seat. I know how easy it is just to take that extra hour, and it's like then you're not present with your family or friends, right? So it's like you're really dropping some gold nuggets of wisdom here. Asko has got a really good question as well that I think you talked about a little bit at the beginning. Perhaps we can dive into this a bit more. So can you share a moment when your leadership was really tested and what you learned from it?
Is it like maybe? Yeah. Honestly, probably during like post rebrand. I think just because is it like a maybe part of me and the business and the brand died at that rebrand time. Like that's where I felt like was an inflection of like, the thing. I don't know. It just feels like that former version. It just kind of like I don't know. The process was so difficult that it became not fun. So I'd say like where my leadership failed is when I probably spent those 2 years Is it like maybe focused more outward than inward on like what or sorry, well, not outward or inward, but like focusing on what I thought we should be doing, not what we should be doing, like I talked about earlier. And I think that was visible. Like the team was not as stoked. We lost a lot of like clarity on why we were doing what we're doing. The results weren't coming, so it was just a tough time. When you're not performing well and the business is not performing well, and you feel kind of lost. And ultimately, we didn't give the new brand at that time. We didn't really instill the same values. A lot of our values were in our old brand name of Endure. It was quite literally like our brand name was our mission, like endure. Like if you're willing to endure, anything is possible. It was really built into this kind of like perseverance and resilience mindset. And I think we just lost that a little bit. And we've certainly refound it in the last couple of years. But I think leadership for me, like where I've faltered is just where I haven't focused on the consumer and team needs. And I focused on the business sort of metrics and external
Right.
needs and what I want to happen. And these, like I said, these arbitrary goals for what?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so like maybe operating inauthentically would be like the best way to say it.
I love the way that you're summing up all these kind of, complex thoughts I'm sure a lot of us deal with as well. So just to wrap us up for today, oh, actually, there's two more questions. So two more questions to wrap us up. This one's a little bit more juicy here. How does your marketing strategy evolve as the company scales? In the early stages, certain tactics such as investing heavily in SEO or paid ads often have a low ROI. As Outway has grown, which marketing channels or strategies have you found deliver the best returns and help sustain your growth?
I think
Get back,
um,
get
things
back.
evolve as you have the knowledge and resources to allow them to as well. So in the early days, we didn't like I bootstrapped it, like I said. So we put in $1,000 from my student loans. And with that $1,000 before raising money, we got to 10 million in sales. So like we really had to like be and if you have an inventory based business, you know that like every dollar you make basically gets sucked back into inventory. So you don't have a lot of free cash in the business to kind of like take huge swings. So I asked myself, like, what can we do? Like, what parts of my network can I utilize to grow the business? We built back in 2016, kind of like what you would call like influencer programs now. So like we just called it ambassador programs. We at one point had 2,000 sort of community ambassadors, and these are people active in their local gyms or cycling clubs or run clubs, and we armed them with like an affiliate code, and that was like a really successful way to get the brand out in the early days. That was kind of success based, and there was no real cost. Like even those ambassadors purchased the product at a good deal. So like we weren't really out on money ever. They were just um, these were pro athletes. These were people that were just stoked to have a deal, right? And they loved the product. So you're like basically VIP customers, like who would buy the product anyways and talk about it? Like how do we arm them with an ability to spread the word? Um, that evolved into event partnerships. So once we had a little more resources, we were able to look, okay, where are these same people going to events? And can we partner with them to give away socks at the events? So like we realized that our best marketing is socks on feet. So the product's great. So like we need people to put them on because a lot of people aren't walking around every day thinking my socks suck. They don't really. It's not really a thought that crosses your mind.
Yeah.
Because it's not a piece of clothing really that we're trying to use as a signal to other people. It's not a fashion element in most cases. So it's a very forgot about piece of apparel. But when you put on a pair and realize what you've been missing, then you have this aha moment. So we asked ourselves, how do we get more socks on feet? So that looked like partnering with different cycling events, marathons, Red Bull events, also events that had a level of credibility, so we could leverage that in advertising to be like, hey, we work with X event. And then from there was taking those two kind of like ways to get the product out there, and then just we're a direct to consumer brand for the most part, so advertising on Meta is sort of the best place to put your dollars, but that can be an expensive way to find product market fit. So like we were able to validate the product and the business in real life with these ambassadors and the events, and it also gave us a ton of valuable information about like what are the common questions people ask. So when you're literally at a trade show working a booth for 8 hours a day and you get asked, so the number one question we get asked is what makes your sock special? Literally everyone, like for some reason, that's the exact sentence that people come up with. And so our number one advertising goal is to answer that question for people, right? Because that is what people want to know. Because again, they're like $22 for a pair of socks, but I can buy a 30 pack for $15.
Right.
They're like,
right.
why? What makes these special? So
Yeah.
like that's a really hard question to answer online and try and advertise online. But I don't know, in terms of how it's evolved, I'd say it's just um, before paying heavily on digital advertising, deeply understanding who the consumer is, what they want to know, and what problem they're trying to solve. And then once you know that, scaling that online through different channels in different markets.
That's brilliant. Yeah. So next question is, what makes your socks special? No, just kidding. Uh, what do you do with leftover? And this would probably be, I think this is coming from Jody as well. So I'm gonna assume here that Jody is probably volunteering to take some of your scraps and things like that and help.
Take a look at the last question. There you go. It's a 2 for 1.
There you
I
go.
couldn't ask Rob because he hasn't accepted my LinkedIn yet, but love to talk to you offline, Rob.
So there
Yeah,
you
sure.
go.
Yeah, we're all aware of like homeless because you can't donate used socks, so it's a huge issue in the homeless. We have done that a ton in the past. We actually here in Victoria, but for sure,
Love to talk to you
happy
offline.
to chat.
I
Yeah,
like the
absolutely.
connection. This is
Thank you,
bridging
guys.
connections. Is what we do here. All right. So, with that being said, I just want to thank you, Rob, so much for, volunteering to be the first one to kick us off with our fireside chats. We'll likely try to do these every, couple of months just to keep the content a little bit fresh, and we'll feature different founders, North America founders, different industries as well. So some of the upcoming folks that we have, I think, are almost like micro celebrities in Canada, which is really, really nice to see that, the team is really supportive of all that. So I'll leave it to you to wrap us up with some, final words if you have anything to share. And thank you.
Get back. No, just appreciate to see a couple of people I know. What's up, Helen, Riley? Good to see you guys. But no, it's always a pleasure. I mean, like advice is cheap. I'm just sharing my stories. Like, put it through your own filter and then see how it works best for you. Don't do what I'm saying because it honestly might not work for you. So every business is super nuanced and contextual. So, I'm just a big fan of just like following your curiosity and just I think what I've found a lot of peace with is just extending that time horizon. So yeah, no, I appreciate you all taking the time to listen to me. Honestly, it's been great for you being here and Dennis the opportunity. And if you want to reach out, Jody, I will accept your invite. And LinkedIn's the best spot for me. And yeah, shoot me a message. Happy to chat. Honestly, anytime. Get back.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
So.